はい、皆さんこんばんは。西側政府とメディアはなぜマイノリティのウクライナ国民であるロシア語話者への差別殺戮に対して沈黙し、ロシアの介入を言われなき侵略、つまり言われなきっていうのは理由のない、身に覚えのない、侵略というようなことですよね。理由のない侵略をしていると。ロシアは正義も何もないということですね。と言い続けてきました。2022年、2月からですから3年半ですね。いまだに日本政府はこう言っておりますし、マスメディア、それから SNS などでも膨大にそういう言葉が飛び交ってます。YouTube なんかでは AI を使ったプロパガンダの YouTube が流れていて、明らかにどっかから金出てんだろうなっていうふうに思います。こういうことをですね、なぜ言い続けてきたのか。明らかに、ドンバスその他のところで虐殺はあったわけです。この問題をですね、誰かに明らかにしてほしいとずっと探していたんですけれども、うってつけの方が見つかりました。元フランス陸軍予備役の将校、タイですね、陸軍での仕事を務めた後、元欧州安全保障協力機構 OSCE、停戦なんかをしている非常に危険地帯へ行ってその監視員をするという仕事ですね。それをおやりになられたブノワ・パレさんを本日はスタジオにお招きして、お話を伺いたいと思います。パレさん、はじめましてよろしくお願いいたします。
よろしくお願いします。
大丈夫ですか？日本語を少し話せますか？
日本語を少しだけ話します。
English and French.
English is better.
English is better. わかりました。私は日本語でお話しして、でこういうふうにパワポもですね、英語化してありますんでね。ですからお話はパレさんにはちゃんと伝わって、でパレさんは私に向かってお話をしていただける。後で全部、日本語のスーパーをつけるということになっております。はい、でメインタイトル、2015年から2022年まで、2014年にユーロマイダンクーデターというものが起きて、そこからウクライナは血生臭い暴力の嵐になるんですけれども、そのもう翌年の2015年から2022年まで、つまりロシア軍が本格的に介入してくる直前までドンバス戦争、これはドンバスという地方ですね、ウクライナの。そのドンバスでウクライナ国民がいるわけですよ。私ロシア語話者ですね。それに対してですね、ウクライナの軍隊が出て行って砲撃空爆など、本格的な戦争をして、殺しにかかる。クレイジーだと思いませんか？しかしそのことを日本は言われなき侵略と言ってるわけです。それに対して介入に入ったら言われなき侵略をしたというふうにロシアは非難され続けてきてるんですけれども、現場でその目で見てきた元 OSCE 監視員がウクライナ戦争の真実を明らかにする第1回ということです。こういう公的なですね、身分の方々はそのチーム全体となって共有される情報、あるいはさまざまな公文書とかそういうものも目にすることもできるし、手に入れることもできる。したがって非常にですね、高度なインテリジェンスを手にして、何が起こっているかをつぶさにですね調べ上げてきたという方なんですね。わかりますか？ OK ですか？
OK です。
ということで、それでパレさんのですね、5本のちょっと紹介を先にしましょう。これです。ブノワ・パレと書いてあります。What I saw in Ukraine ということで、2015から2022ということで、このような分厚いですね5本です。これで英語版でですね、これが600ページ超えてる5本なんですね。そして、これはですね Amazon で売ってるんですよね。オンラインで読むこともできるんですが、頼めばこのように製本してくれて、それで、本の形をとって届けてもらうことができる、そういうサービスもやってるっていうことなんですね。で現在、English and French、あとイタリアン、
next year、
それから
多分日本語版、多分ロシア語。
ロシア語ね。ロシア語は需要があると思うし、きっと読みたいと思う人もいるでしょう。そしてあと日本語版は出すにあたって我々もパレスさんに協力しようかなというふうに思っています。なんとか必ずですね、日本の読者の方々に手に届くようにしたいというふうに思ってます。さて、パレさんのプロフィールです。まず1、フランス陸軍の予備役の将校であると、それから元フランス国防省のアナリストでもあったと。で2015年から2022年までドンバス地域、このウクライナの東部ですね、それから欧州安全保障協力機構 OSCE の監視員、ウクライナ特別監視ミッションとして、監視員を務めたということなんです。
Thank you very much for this introduction. If you allow me, before I speak about myself, I would like to thank you for your kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here with Japanese media because I think Japan is a great country with a great culture, and it's an honor for me to be here tonight and to have a chance to talk to Japanese people in Japan. I thank you very much for this opportunity. Now, talking about myself, if I may go back, I have been working in the field of international relations and security affairs for the last 30 years. I started in 1995 when I was doing my military service. I belong to this last generation in France that had to do the military service. And during that military service, I had the chance to be assigned to some headquarters, which were headquarters of an elite unit, the Rapid Action Force, it was called, at high level, and I was surrounded with the elite of the French military, the French army, in this case the French Forward Legion, French Marines, French paratroopers. All these people were surrounding me, and I learned a lot with these people about the French military. And in those days, in 1995, it was the end of a civil war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So every day this story was in the news. And France at that time was very much involved in the conflict there because we had the biggest contingent deployed in Bosnia-Herzegovina, deepest contingent of the United Nations. And in the spring of 1995, we lost many soldiers, French soldiers, in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And so after a while, I wanted to volunteer to go there. I had to wait for a while. I had to sign a special contract. And in the end, the following year, I had a chance to be deployed in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this changed my life. Because I discovered that I had a strong interest in trying to alleviate the suffering of peoples who were suffering from major disasters such as war. I discovered this in me, that it had meaning for me to get involved in that. So this first mission in Bosnia-Herzegovina, 1996, was a key moment of my life that, as I said, was a turning point and that touched me deeply as a human being. One day, I guess I should write about that period as well, but it's an old story now, Bosnia-Herzegovina, but this is where I learned a lot about human nature. And human nature, unfortunately, it is what it is, with its big qualities and big flaws. And I lost my illusions of mankind in a way when I was there. But what I learned in this country was that there is not a single country that can call itself righteous and good and superior to others. There is fault in every human being, and there is fault in every culture. There's also good things, right? But none of us can consider that we are so superior to everybody else. And that's a problem of the Western culture as a whole, I would say. Western culture considered itself for centuries as superior to others. And I learned that this cannot be true. Anyways, fast forward. Then quickly I found an opportunity to continue to work in Bosnia-Herzegovina, but as a civilian, working for the OSCE for the first time. So I transitioned from military to OSCE. And I stayed 5 years working for OSCE in Bosnia. And then 9/11 happened, 11 September, Twin Towers fell down. And this was a big event for everybody who is old enough to remember. And that also was an event that changed my perception of life. And I decided to leave the Balkans then and to join my government because I thought there was a challenge in this event for the entire Western world. It was not just America as I saw it back then. So I joined the French government. I decided to work for the French Ministry of Defense as a civilian. I passed a concours and I ended up working in this unit where I became an analyst for the French Ministry of Defense. It is another period of my life where I learned a lot, but I won't go into details. But it's just to tell the audience that I also learned how to look at problems from the perspective of a government of a Western country, because you see things from a strategic level. And you have access to information that not everybody has access to, right? You know more than journalists when you work at that level. And it's very enriching. It's you learn a lot, but also you know that there are some things you cannot talk about. Anyways, then I moved on, and for a period of my life, I started to work only like part-time. I was working part-time for the military again. I went back to the Army Reserve, right? I was an Army Reserve officer, and I signed I returned as an Army Reserve officer. I signed a special contract with the French Army to work with them on short-term contracts, but on missions abroad. So between 2004 until 2012, I did many missions abroad with the French military. I went to Kosovo, I went to Afghanistan 4 times, and I went to Lebanon.
Very dangerous.
Afghanistan was very dangerous, I can't deny. Lebanon, it was calm when I was there, but it was also a way to learn a lot about this specific country and the problems that it was facing. Now, every time I went to these different countries, I learned a lot about the specific situation of the country, and also how problems of international issues are dealt with. Tensions between great powers always have importance in the situation where all these countries found themselves. So you learn a lot not only at the local level but also at the strategic level. And what is interesting is to be able to make the connection between the two. And in the army, I had a chance also to make those connections because I also had the chance to go back again to the French Ministry of Defense, but in different offices, several times. And it is then, in 2007, I went back to the French Ministry of Defense in a different office where I used to work. And it is then that I had access to diplomatic telegram. And one day I read a diplomatic telegram of my own embassy in Russia. It was signed by the French ambassador in Russia. And the telegram was about Ukraine. Because at that time, America was pushing European countries to accept Ukraine within NATO. It started from 2007. It was not talked about in the press, but I could see that there was pressure from the American government, it was Bush administration at the time, on Europe to accept Ukraine and Georgia into NATO. But the answer of the French ambassador back then was very clear that for Russia, Ukraine in NATO would be a red line. It would be totally unacceptable. It was very clear. And I understood it from that moment. So, and the main reason why it was unacceptable for Russia was because of Crimea. Because in Crimea, Russia had this Sebastopol Navy base. And it was explained that this Sebastopol Navy base was the only Russian Navy base that had access to warm waters, as it was said, all year long. Because Russia is a country that doesn't have much access to the seas otherwise, because of the weather, the winter, right? So the Black Sea was the only place where they had this access all year long. And they were afraid that if Ukraine joined NATO, it was only a matter of time before this Navy base would be given by Ukraine to America. It was stated clearly from that moment. And so later, when the crisis started in Ukraine in 2014, the first action that Russia did was to secure its Navy base in Sebastopol. And I understood it immediately because I remembered what I read how many years ago before. It was 7-8 years before. It was perfectly clear for me that Russia would not allow this Navy base to they would not allow the chance to lose this Navy base. So when the event started in Ukraine in 2014, when the nationalist government took power by force following a coup d'etat, the Crimean people from Crimea, they wanted to join Russia, and Russia was very open to it and help the process. So for me, it was perfectly clear why they did it, and it was also perfectly clear for me that most of the Crimean people, they wanted this to happen. Anyways, so during these days as a French Army Reserve officer, I learned a lot that would serve me afterwards, that would help me to understand afterwards the problems in Ukraine, right? So then from 2014, when the crisis started in Ukraine, I volunteered with my government to be sent there with the OSCE mission. But initially I was not selected among the first people because they only selected people who spoke Russian. So I didn't speak Russian, so they did not select me from the start. One thing I did not mention also is that during these years I also did many missions as a civilian, working for OSCE as well, OSCE, but I was observing elections. And I went back to Afghanistan in 2014, linked to the elections. But I also went to Pakistan, Bangladesh, different European countries to observe elections. And you also learn a lot about all these different countries when you do that.
Very dangerous.
Pakistan was not safe. I was escorted all the time by Pakistani police.
But Pakistan and Afghanistan border is gray zone, tribal area.
Tribal areas was
I've
quite dangerous.
been to Afghanistan, Pakistan, the tribal area, and I interviewed Taliban. Many Taliban.
Courageous, just courageous guy.
After 9/11.
I see. Maybe someday I will also write about my experience in Afghanistan, because it was also fascinating in many ways. It's a long story.
Okay.
Anyways, now, so talking about Ukraine, finally I was allowed to be deployed, selected. I was selected in January 2015 to be sent to Ukraine, but my departure was delayed a bit, and I ended up in Ukraine in July. And then this is when I started to work in Ukraine from the ground. After initial training in Kiev, I was deployed to Donetsk for 10 days. I had more briefings, and I had my first field experience in Donetsk. Very interesting. Also, I talk about this in my book in length. My first patrol, as it was called, in Donetsk region lasted for 13 hours. And even on that first day, I learned so much. And I mean, I had a chance also at the end of the day to go to the morgue, because a woman had been killed by Ukrainian shelling. And I thought, well, how can it be on my first day that I have to go and see dead people? So my boss back then just gave me the choice. He said, you don't have to come. You have a lot for your first day, so I can go on my own. So he went on his own. I didn't have the courage to face death at that moment. So, but, you know, it immediately, like, I was like emerged into the human drama of this war. And from the very first day, when I talked to separatist soldiers, you know, Western media said, you know, the conflict is Ukraine. It's just Russian aggression against Ukraine. But the people I talked to, they were people from Ukraine. They were Ukrainian citizens, but they were fighting their own military.
Yes.
And I could see that from first-hand experience on the front line, because we were on the front line, talking with these people. And I remember the guy spoke English. He was young, glasses, and I asked him, so where do you live? Where are you from? And then he showed me the buildings behind us, like 2 kilometers away, maybe. They were tall buildings. He said, I live there. This is where I live. This is my city. I'm defending my city. And then from my first day...
This building is broken?
It was Gorlovka city. Gorlovka. Gorlovka is this city north of Donetsk People's Republic. It was martyr city. It was heavily shelled from the beginning. And then I talked to more people in this city afterwards. And, you know, every time I talk to people, they said, all the military people around here, they're all from the city. There are no Russian people here. But, you know, for Western media, it was just Russian invasion, right? So from the very beginning, I could see that between the narrative that was sold to us by Western media, maybe in Japan as well, I don't know, but in Western media, the reality on the ground was totally different from what I could experience. And it was like this for the next 4 years and 5 years. The experience I had from the ground, which I talk about lengthily in my book, it was almost every single day different than when the Western media would tell you about the situation. So, and I discovered so much about the country back then, so that I decided to write this book. So then I guess that's enough for Jiko Shokai. Maybe I talked too much already. And I started to talk about the topic of Ukraine itself. So, but that's to tell you, you know, where I come from and how I learned all these things.
Thank you. 自分の紹介だけではなくて、ウクライナの紹介、ヨーロッパの現状についての紹介もしていただきました。パレさんのプロフィールの2、 ウクライナのほか全欧州の軍事政治メディア情報機関関連の動き等にもついても、これはもう間違いなく日本人の専門家よりもはるかに詳しいと。今プロフィールをお聞きになっていただいて分かるように、フランスの陸軍で働きボスニア・ヘルツェゴビナ、これは重要なんですよ。なぜあの時の空爆が許されたのか、そして今回は全く違うロジックで動いているのか、これはですね後で話進んでいきますけれども、暗殺された安倍元総理はですね、プーチンのロジック、この介入のロジックというのはボスニアの時のロジックと同じようなもんじゃないかっていうようなことを言う発言したんですね。で、さらに今の911以降非常に危険なアフガニスタンとか現場にですね、あちらの現場に行かれたと。で、私は同じようにアフガニスタンとそれからパキスタンの間の国境が全然ないノーボーダーのトライバルエリアと呼ばれている、誰でも行けるんですけどとっても危険なところですね。でそこに住んでいる住民はパシュトゥン人という民族が多いんですけど、パシュトゥン人はみんなタリバンです。たくさんの人をインタビューしました。で彼らは字も書けない、全然コーランも読めない、いろいろなお説教を聞いてるだけだけれども、俺たちはロケットランチャーは撃てるよと、戦車も操縦できるよと、ゲリラ戦はいくらでも得意でと。アメリカがなんか怒って、アメリカっていうどこにあるのか知らないけれども、アメリカがやってきたら全部戦ってやるよと。いやいや、アメリカはどんなすごいところ敵だと思ってんだと、核爆弾持ってるんだぞと、核爆弾ってなんだかわからないけれども俺たちは最後の最後まで叩き出すよと。有史以来そうだったと。で実際アメリカ軍は結局叩き出されましたね。そしてアフガニスタンに手を出した帝国はアレクサンダー大王から始まって、ソ連も手を出して、大英帝国も手を出して、そしてアメリカも手を出した。手を出した国は全部その後帝国が崩壊しております。実際に今アメリカ帝国はですね崩壊し始めているというところにあるわけですね。そういう現場にでも僕どころじゃない、本当に危険な現場に行かれていました。そういうキャリアがあった上でさらにウクライナにも行ったということで、正直言ってですね、エセとは言いませんけれども、テレビの地上波のテレビに出ていらっしゃる方、まともな方は多分いらっしゃると思うんですけれども、元防衛官僚、それから自衛隊の OB、いろいろね軍事のね専門家だとおっしゃっている方々、まともな方々がほとんど出てこれない、出てくるのは政府のプロパガンダ、西側のプロパガンダ、それを口にする人ばっかりという非常に情けない状態にあります。そんな人たちよりもはるかに現場に詳しいというよりも実際に任務に就かれていた方です。で母国を離れかつての職場に戻れなくなることを覚悟の上で、現役では語れないことを語るためジャーナリスト、言論人、評論家としての活動を始めていると、すでに始めておられます。もう軍人であったり OSCE というところには戻れないんじゃないかと。母国はフランスなわけですけれども、フランスからも離れるという決意もして、その上で日本が素晴らしい国だなとすごく気に入られて、で、日本語学校にも通い、しばらくはもう移住して働いたりしていきたいというふうに思ってらっしゃるという、そういうことなんですね。
So, well, commenting on this part, indeed, when I came back from Ukraine, first of all, I was working in Ukraine until 25th of February 2022. That is to say, until the day after the start of the Russian offensive or special military operation. And then we were evacuated to Moldova for a while. And then my contract ended in end of May 2022. And from 1st of July, I had the chance to work for a French independent media, online media, called François. Actually, the name is well known in France because it used to be major newspapers in the 1950s, 1960s in France, but since then, it lost a lot of its previous aura, and now it's only an online paper. Anyways, I had a chance to work for this media as a journalist. I ended up even having an official journalist card, which was given to me thanks to this contract. And by the way, I even had to go through an official commission where you have judges and people from the business. It's like almost a tribunal, and they assess whether you deserve to be considered an official journalist or not. And once I passed this hearing, I was allowed to be considered officially a journalist, and I was given the official card. Anyways, so I worked as a journalist for about 2 years, and actually all the articles I wrote during this period, most of them were about Ukraine, but not only. This is the topic of a second book. This is my first book, Experience in OSCE. And the second book, which is not yet translated, well, actually, it was released in French, and it will be released in English very soon, probably next week. And it is just a follow-up. And as a journalist, I try to use all the accumulated knowledge that I had from the time I was working in Ukraine to understand what was going on afterwards. And I think the knowledge I had accumulated helped me a lot to understand what happened afterwards. So that's why I wanted to write about it. But then I also had the impression that I did not have enough impact with this work as a journalist because only a few people read my articles. So I thought, okay, now I want to talk about my experience by writing a book. And I started to write this book from 2023. Yes, March 2023 I started, and I finished 2 years later. So this book is 2 years of my life of writing. And of course I used a lot of my personal knowledge, but also a lot of my notes, because every time I was going to meetings in Ukraine I was taking notes, and I kept all my notes. So I was able to report precisely about everything because I still have those notes with me. So that's why my book is as precise as can be. Anyways, so what else can I say here? Resigned to living in his homeland and never returning to his former workplace. Yeah, so by releasing the book under my own name, I knew that I could no longer work for my government. They would not allow me to write a book like this. But I considered, okay, I accept not to go back to my previous life because I thought it was too important to speak about what I knew, because I realized very few people knew what I knew about Ukraine, and even within the OSCE. Because within the OSCE I belong to a special unit, a small unit called Human Dimension. We were dealing with human rights violations. We had access to figures of civilian casualties, which were considered confidential. Very few people had access to that. Or if people had access, it was only for a certain area. And because of my specific career inside the organization, I ended up being one of the four or five people who had access to the entire database of civilian casualties. Not more than that, 4 or 5 people. And I was one of them. And I knew the others, they would not talk. So I thought, okay, I'm the only one with this knowledge who is not afraid to talk. So I have to talk, I have to make it public, because I thought what I knew can change completely how we, in the people around the world, perceive this war in Ukraine. Literally, I realized that. So I thought this is so important that I have to make it public so that people can see what the reality really is. Of course, then some people will not be interested to read because they, first of all, they may not know that the book exists, right? Because mainstream media ignore me, right? Obviously. And it's not a surprise. And then it's only alternative media who can show interest. So people like you. So I thank God that people like you exist. So that people can have different type of information than what the mainstream media tell us. And what I learned with all my missions abroad since the beginning is that between the official narrative that the mainstream media are selling us and the reality of the ground, there is always a difference. Always. I learned that from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And with the war in Ukraine, it even became huge. And I could tell it firsthand, once again, about this huge gap. And at some point in Ukraine, I had a chance, it was in 2016, I had a chance to talk to a French journalist who was working for a major French media outlet, major. And by that time, I had discovered the work of this university professor, Ivan Kashanovsky, about, he was interviewed recently by University, not the University, Neutrality Studies.
Ottawa.
Ottawa, from Ottawa. And he did...
Ukraine,
yes, he's a Ukrainian man. And he actually wrote an incredible piece of work about the Maidan massacre, which is the origin of the war. And when you read his work, you become convinced that we were lied to. People around the world were lied to about what really happened. And when you read this work, you realize it's a complete reversal of understanding of what happened. What was presented to us as a revolution of the united Ukrainian people against a dictator who ordered to shoot down demonstrators, it's completely false. What happened was you had snipers paid by, one not sure by whom, by the way, but snipers paid by some people who were tasked to shoot at demonstrators and policemen alike to cause chaos and to have a major scandal that could be blamed on the police of Yanukovych, the then president. So this was a false flag attack. This is what we call a false flag attack. And the book of, now it's a book, by the way, written by Kachanovsky, it's a demonstration of this point. And in 2016, I had just discovered this theory. I thought it was just a theory back then. And I wanted to ask this journalist, hey, I found the work of this guy, Ivan Kachanovsky. This is what he says. If what he says is true, this is major. And I said, I guess you as a journalist, you would be interested to look into it and see by yourself whether this story is credible or not. And this journalist told me, oh, well, no, this would change too many things. So I'm not going to read this. And then I understood, okay, if this is a journalist from mainstream media, he does not hesitate more than 2 seconds before saying, no, I will not read this. Because it changes the narrative, right? And then you understand, oh, okay, so for all these people, what matters is not the truth. What matters is the narrative. They have orders, I don't know, they are told this is the narrative. And every information you collect has to feed the narrative. And by the way, this is how top diplomats think as well, or even top military people think. You know, they are told, okay, we have a political goal. The political is this. So everything we say needs to serve this political goal. So we will exploit events that happened if they serve our goal, our political goal. If the reality on the ground doesn't serve our political goal, we will ignore it. This is how governments work worldwide. And I knew it because even when I was working for the government, I knew that, you know, it was a kind of play always when you talk about international matters. Each country has their own interest, and they will have a public speech depending on their own perceived interest. Like if you talk about the Iraq War, we go way back before. I understood when I was working in the Ministry of Defense that countries would follow the United States narrative if they thought that would help them, because they thought the United States is a very powerful country. We want to be friends with the United States because they are so powerful, so we will say whatever the United States want us to say. And I knew this is what's going on because I was reading a lot of information about it. Every country behaved like that until now. You know, like in Eastern Europe, you had many countries who their goal was to join NATO. Mm-hmm. They knew if they wanted to join NATO, they should not upset the United States. And the United States was playing with them. You know, if you want to join NATO, it would be nice if you repeat the same talking points about Iraq that we have. So then that's why you have this division in Europe between what Rumsfeld called Old Europe versus New Europe. And all the Eastern European countries, they wanted to join NATO. So they would repeat whatever the United States would say. Mm. They would say, oh yes, we need to invade Iraq. The United States is right to invade Iraq. They didn't care about the truth of the argument. All they cared for was to please the United States so that they could join NATO. This is what happened. And Western European countries didn't have this mindset, so they would dare to talk differently. In those days, France and Germany allied with Russia against American invasion of Iraq. But this was a different era. Right? Since then, Western Europe aligned itself with the interest of the United States. It went gradually. But the last time my own country, France, had an independent policy, I would say it was during those days of the Chirac presidency. Unfortunately, then afterwards, it started to be a systematic alignment with American interest. And I would even say the American deep state interest. So you see, I start to talk about politics quite pretty quickly, all to explain, you know, about what I did and what I did. So maybe we can go to the next question.
自己紹介をはるかにまた超えたお話を熱弁を、振るっていただきましたけれども、非常に重要な話があったように思います。深く立ち入るのはこの後またあると思いますので、次へ進みたいと思います。